In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with countdown will be given.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Rebecca.
And I'm the Geeky Hippie. Welcome to What the Adaptation. We're not quite What the Adaptation anymore, because we're now covering a new show. We're finally hitting season 1 of The Witcher on Netflix. But we have a special guest we need to introduce. We have Jenn, keeper of the Chronicles. Jenn, and tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Glenn and Rebecca, for having me tonight. I'm really excited to talk about The Witcher. I'm Jenn, known as Keeper of the Chronicles on Twitter. I've been a huge Wheel of Time fan. Some of you might know me on social media for years. And I also have been doing kind of a side project as Goldie Thoughts, which I'm also, coming here today, kind of talking about stuff other than Wheel of Time for that persona. And I also wanted to share tonight that be looking forward to what I'm going to be putting out in the future, because I'm working with at Comrade Fall on Twitter and at What the Communist. We're going to be coming out with a new thing dropping shortly. So stay tuned for that. But otherwise, I'm here to really dive into The Witcher, and I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah,
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. I have to say,
Thank
I'm
you.
intrigued.
Yes.
Max is tonight. Max was unwell. He'll be back next week. He said to say hi.
Okay.
So our first question of the night: what are changes that from the source material that we liked and didn't like? Let's start with Rebecca.
Okay. I mean, so for me, the real big one in this episode was just the inclusion of Ciri at this point in the story, and kind of fleshing out her background too, since we don't get a lot of what we saw of her, at this point. So overall, I love this choice a lot. I mean, I think it was kind of essential because, she's a character that needs to be established. That relationship that she has with Geralt is a really core relationship. And I think overall, like in this episode, everything that they did with Ciri worked well for me, especially on rewatch. I had some, like, her story overall in the season was, I don't think, as strong as the others, probably because they had to kind of like make up a lot, to fit it in there. But in this episode, it worked. And the only like part of it that I would say, well, I don't know, maybe I should save that a little bit because we haven't talked about like some of the issues that might come up yet. Do you want me to save that?
Yeah, I'll save that.
Okay.
I like the change of adding Ciri, and we'll see who else they add in later on this season, but adding Ciri was really important. She's definitely my second favorite character from the books. We haven't met my favorite character from the books yet. We'll get soon. But it definitely isn't Geralt. Even though he's a great character. He's in my top 50 characters in science fiction and fantasy. But adding her and introducing her storyline, it might have confused a lot of viewers from what I understand with the whole flashback time sequence thing.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about that, like, because that, I had like one experience with that, like the first time watching it when I hadn't read the books, and then this different experience when I rewatched it. That was kind of one of my plot hole type things but not really a plot hole, but an issue that came up.
I caught on to it really quick because I was watching with subtitles. So when I saw the one battle referenced, your mother won her first battle you won your first battle here, and then literally 3 minutes later Renfri says Calanthe just won her first battle at such and such. Oh, okay.
So I totally did not catch this the first time. Like I hadn't read, I totally didn't catch that these were different time frames. Like as the season went on, I was like, there's different time frames going on here. I think this is this, but I don't know. But I did not catch that. But I mean, so they put those couple clues in the first episode. There was that one where like, we have the scene where, Ciri's talking about Calanthe, winning her first victory when she was her age, so long ago. And then Renfri says, that Calanthe just won it. So, and then also in that same Ciri scene, in that same Ciri scene, they're talking about basically what happened with Renfri as like a long time ago, because they're talking about like the cursed
not that
you know,
long
the
ago,
daughters.
sorcerers put girls in towers.
Yes,
and
they're
they
talking about
died.
right. So there's all those little clues in there, but they were just so subtle. I
Very.
did not catch that the
I
first
didn't
time through.
either.
But I totally did the second time through, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is how they were trying to do it, but I didn't get it.
I hadn't
You-
read the books when I first watched the show. What was yours? What was yours, Jen? I'm sorry.
So I thought we were going to be like deep diving. So there's a couple of like things that the show gave us that the books didn't. That I thought was really cool. They did in this first episode. So Queen Calanthe's husband, and I'm going to maybe pronounce this incorrectly, like iced search. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So he was depicted falling in battle with like that arrow through the eye or whatever. And in the books, like that's not really, you don't know exactly how he died. So they kind of give you that about how he fell on the battlefield with Queen Calanthe, and you're like, oh, okay, this is new, this is different. Also, I like how the fact in this, I know we're not talking about it, but it comes up later how like Ciri was playing Knucklebones like in the street with the kids, and like in the books they didn't have her depicted that way. Like they had her running through with like other kids, like at first when Geralt first sees her, but he doesn't know it's her. And like, and that's not really specifically explained. So they gave those little bit of like different things that are in the books that I really appreciate. And just like you said, you guys nailed it right off the bat as soon as we came on. Like, obviously, the big elephant in the room is they're actually showing Cintra, what's going on with the fall of Cintra. Like, you do have that in the books, but it's some of it is like through third person when it's like Dandelion or Gaskier, like was like telling about it. Like, but this is like first person battle time. Like, you really get that, and I really I appreciated that, especially like episode 1. But it was different. It was like, whoa, we're getting into it right away. Like the books don't have that until like later, you know. So I liked that. It was interesting.
Definitely seeing the fall of Cintra from other than Ciri's eyes and Cahir's eyes, it changes things a lot. And there's so many little nods throughout, especially in dialogue. There's a lot of lines that are straight from the book, the short story, but given to different people. Somebody somebody else gets a line. And then there are key words like ultimatum.
Yes.
Tridum ultimatum was literally just straight out of the book, just leaving off the location it was tied to. But they made sure to throw it in there. And just so many little beats. There was the rat killed by the thrown fork. Geralt threw the fork at Calderman in the short story. Reprimands Geralt for throwing the fork at the rat and killing the rat because Labusha, Calderman's wife, screamed at him over it. And here, when Marilka's walking Geralt to take the Kikimora to Stregobord, or Irian, as he's going by,
Irian,
about killing a rat, she threw a fork at it.
That's true. Yeah.
And she's a little, I'll get to her later. She's a little psychopath. Sociopath. One of the two. I'm not sure which it is in clinical case, but
I kind of liked her though.
She's a monster.
I kind of liked her. Oh.
She's a monster. And I think that's one of the themes of the whole series is that we are the monsters. But that's the eight book theme right there, the entire Witcher saga. But
that's very true. That's very deep. And a lot of people reading it don't get it, but I didn't get it at first until I did some and I was like, oh God, okay, this is actually more on the human condition than anything else.
I mean, what's her name said it in this episode? She I can't Renfri said it in this episode. Yeah, in the woods. The more and more I travel, the more I see that we're the monsters. People are the monsters. And that's straight out of later in the books. I think it's said a number of times in the books.
Yeah.
But people miss a lot that's in these books, and I don't understand it. Did anybody have anything they disliked?
So I didn't, other than, like I said, I was going to bring up just the confusion over the timelines, because that was one of the things that took me a long time in my first watch to really figure out what was going on. And again, I caught it quick the second time around, but it, so I do think that by adding the bits with Ciri, like it makes perfect sense to do that. And, you know, I have varying, you know, degrees of how much I think that worked in the different episodes. In this episode, I think it did work, but I wish they had like done something to kind of more clearly mark the time, like given us a date or something, or even just a, you know, so many years later, so many years earlier, what, you know, just something like that on the screen to make it clear.
That would have been nice.
That would have been nice. I think that you're definitely on alone, Rebecca, because I think it's like the number one takeaway from like the season 1 is like people were like, please don't do that. That was a little confusing, especially for people that hadn't read the books. They're like, but
totally.
The only thing, and I'll probably touch on it slightly later, and it's not a thing I hated so much. It was just like it was like, all right, it's a little slow, was when Calanthe was dying, and they like I think that scene just dragged on a little bit because she was like prone on her back dying for like 2/3 of the episode that they showed her. So I was like, yes, it's unfortunate, it's sad, we get the gravitas from that, but like her in the Ciri, I know that, you know, later they're not going to have that again, because obviously what you see at the end of the first episode with Calanthe, she's not around anymore. But I know they had to establish that connection, but I feel like they were buying time with that a little bit, but that was it. That's like my biggest complaint, and that's really nothing. So that did a good job. They did a good job.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say I didn't like that was a change from the source material, and it's like a minor nitpick, I guess, is transferring that whole prophecy that Renfri had when they were in Geralt's room at Caldemane's to a dream that Geralt had in the woods, unless that was actually him remembering in his dream what she was saying to him during Happy Time, which I'm unclear as to what exactly that was going on there.
It is a little confusing. I do think that little bit was not as clear as it could have been also. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't notice until I reread the short story a couple of weeks ago, and then a week ago. Well, a couple of weeks ago was probably, so like the third time I read the short story, that little prophecy in that one paragraph. I didn't pay attention the first 2 times I listened to the book, which, by the way, is, I think, the best way to consume the Witcher series is Peter Kenny's audio narration. It will blow your mind.
You're not alone. A lot of people have heard say that.
I've been listening to it also. It is good.
It's just, I didn't catch that little prophecy there until much later. And the sad part is I saw it on the show 2 years ago when it first aired on Netflix, including The Girl in the Woods Will Be With You Forever, or whatever it was. And then it cuts to, you know, they show the shot cutting at the end to Ciri running through the woods.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I don't get it. I'm just not catching it. What is wrong with me?
I'll tell you, I was like listening to the stories, and like there was some of that I'm like, oh, this didn't make it into the first season. And then as I'm rewatching, I'm like, yeah, it did. And like I just didn't really remember that, like because I think I started to watch like the beginning of episode 3, and that's like the Witcher story, the like the first one. And then when I was like, oh yeah, I don't think this is in there. I'm like, yeah, it is.
that was clever because it almost starts like the first short story of The Witcher, where he's at the bar and those guys start harassing him.
Yeah, there is that bit. Yeah.
And so when I was rewatching the show the first time after having read the books, I was like, okay, so it's that story. And then, oh no, it's not. It's the Renfri story. Okay, now I'm confused. Do they do that story? I don't remember. I'll wait until I see the rest of the season. But at first I thought it was that short story, because it was like they took that scene and gave it to Renfri's boys.
Right.
Yeah.
And put it in the main room of the tavern.
Yeah,
but you know, that was good, because like I think you need that, like just establishing basically like what people think about Witchers, and just in general. That's another change I did like, was actually starting with the lesser evil story as like the first way, because like I don't think, like, when I was first listening to the audiobook and the first story, The Witcher, like, it wasn't grabbing me at first. Like, that first story didn't really grab me. I had to listen to it a couple times, and then, like, as I got on, like, the other stories were like grabbing me more. So I don't think that one was like the great, like, first. Like, I understand why in the book, because it's just like a sort of like, this is what Witchers do kind of story, but like somehow it just didn't grab me as much. So I think this one is more thematic to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how they did that too. How they showed The Witcher, because Glenn's right. The entire thing with Renfri and The Witcher talking was like in that back room in that tavern or whatever, and it was a whole lot more frustrating. And then they had a conversation later, which he was talking about, which when on like in her room, but it like that whole showdown in the middle of the tavern, like the alderman and The Witcher were friends at first. Like, it's not like he had to go find the alderman. Like he was walking in with the Kikamora, and the alderman was like, "Hey,
we don't even get the alderman."
Yeah, he's right there. Yeah, he's like, so that was a little bit different. And but I like how they did that, because like Rebecca said, it showed the tension there, which if you're a non-reader, which you have to definitely take into account, because you have to draw in all kinds of different, viewerships and whatever. It shows, I think the book fans and video game fans and show fans can all like agree, like, oh yeah, you need this tension set up, because otherwise you think he's a good person and people would want him around, and why is there tension? What's going on? Like,
he kills monsters, like, that's good.
Isn't that a good thing? So you have to get that. He's different. I'm not like you.
Although I do have to wonder how those guys spotted he was a Witcher so quickly. I don't think his medallion was showing when he walked in, and
maybe
from
their
his eyes were.
Is it his eyes?
Yeah, but it's kind of hard to spot somebody's eyes from that distance in a dark tavern.
Yeah,
they don't exactly reflect light like Perrin Goldeneyes eyes reflect light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's see what we've got for our next question here. Did you guys? Pardon?
A happy one. Happy, good question.
Well, now I don't know how happy this question is. Did you guys spot any plot holes or plot issues?
Oh, never mind. I'm ahead.
Faced
Sorry.
due to these changes that we've spotted.
I just kind of already covered the one that I had for that, which is like, again, it's not a plot hole, but just I think they created the issue of the confusion over the timelines, and they could have solved that, but like by introducing Ciri the way that they did create that confusion. That was mine. I didn't have another example.
Ciri breaking the monolith. That was my thing. It's not like a plot hole, but that's like different from the books. It's in the video games, but it's like that was different. Like that didn't happen like exactly like that in the books. I mean, they were there about how elves traveled within the conjunction and blah blah blah, and they use a monolith, and that's all explained. But like sticking strictly to this episode, strictly season 1, episode 1, like that's very interesting how they're throwing that in there right off the bat. I mean, that becomes a focal point later on, but it's like, oh, you're deviating a little bit, like right off the bat. Like that's going to be interesting how you're going to be like explaining that like right at the very beginning and differently. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. That was my two.
Are the monoliths mentioned in the first 2 books, or are those mentioned in the later? Because those
are not mentioned. That there was so in the first book they have that confrontation with the elf in the woods who almost like killed like Jaskier and him, and then the lady came or whatever and told them not to, the forest lady or whatever, and you do have the edge of the world, right? So you have that, but it's not necessarily the monoliths so much. I mean, that doesn't come until like way later. So it's very
I don't remember the monoliths at all.
It's not really in the books. It's like in the video games, more of a thing. It's a side quest in the Witcher video games. So I think what they wanted to do is take a little bit of element from that in the very first episode, because you have to remember you're drawing in all the different audiences, right? It's the very first episode of the very thing. So you have to have something from the video game, something from the books, and then something that you do originally. And I think that's I think if that's what they were trying to accomplish, I don't know, but if that's what they did a really good tie-in with all of those things. So I think it's interesting. I do not know, because would anyone know how that's going to continue to progress? But it will be interesting to see how like that goes.
Because I've only listened to the main series once through. It's the first 2 books I've listened to twice, and this story I've listened to like 5 times now. So.
I've only listened to everything like once through too. So like, I'm not super into it, but I remember from the video games, it was like a really long side quest that you had to do. And I was like, oh, Monolith is like, it's like a Witcher 3 Wild Hunt side quest. I'm like, that's pretty cool. I'm like, okay, we're doing that in the show now. So that was all I had to say about that.
Yeah, I didn't see any plot holes or issues with the picks I made or changes.
No.
So I guess we can move on to what was fixed or sped up by making any of these changes. I will start with that one. By switching to Marilka, we got rid of Caldamain, and that got rid of several scenes of conversations that they could drop and reduce the amount of time that's taken up with that particular storyline. It got rid of 2 sets, 2 different set locations that you had to have. Well, actually 3, which is partially also tied into the next one, which is that whole prophecy thing I mentioned. That Caldamain's upstairs bedroom that Geralt was staying at. So both those changes tied into getting rid of that set. So it cut down on expense of building number of sets, and it cut down on amount of time with a significant amount, because the conversations with Caldamain take up a lot of time. And there's that whole thing with the letter from the letter of marque or whatever, rid of power or whatever that the king grants Renfri, where she can do whatever she wants, and that whole thing that that whole scene's gone, and don't have to deal with any of that. And the significant amount of money they saved by switching from Caldamain to Marilka.
That's a really good point. I never considered that. Like the whole, I mean, because I noticed it, but when you talk about sets, I'm like, oh, they could just have the one set that he comes back to in the woods, and that's when Renfri met him up, instead of like having to make a whole like set for like her bedroom and like the interior tavern part. I'm like, oh, okay, that does make sense. I never looked at it that way, but yeah, that's so true. That's true.
Yeah,
Jen?
That's a really good point.
It's smart to look at those things. Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
I really don't have anything, unfortunately, here, other than what I guess Glenn said, as far as speeding things up. Obviously, introducing Ciri right away. Ciri wasn't even in, like, she was mentioned, like Princess Sorla was mentioned, like, and not until later, and she was like a major, person. But having her right off is just, I guess, in itself, but we've already discussed that, of course. So I really don't have anything truly new to add. I'm sorry, unfortunately.
Hey, not a problem.
I'll just add, because I'm not really adding anything new, but I mean, for me, I think you kind of touched on it, Glenn, a little bit. Like, there's a lot in the stories about like just the conversations that people are having, right? Like, they're sitting in taverns or whatever and having conversations, and there's so much information that's like dropped in those kinds of scenes in the stories. And I find that for me, like, to get like really invested in the stories, I am most pulled in when it's like, the relationships that are like Geralt and Ciri, or Geralt and Yennefer, like, or whatever we're calling the bard, because he's got like 3 different names as far as I'm concerned.
And if you listen to the audiobooks, they
changed the pronunciations.
Yes,
that drove me nuts.
And it's the same narrator. And then he goes back. He does Dandelion, Dandelion, then back to Dandelion in another narration, and then he's Dandelion again, and then he's Dandelion.
Losing it that he changed the pronunciation. I'm like,
in some languages, his name is Buttercup.
Yeah,
because I think that's what Jaskier actually translates as.
I looked that Buttercup. Up. It does. So, it does.
Yeah, he's actually got dozens of names.
Yeah,
he's got dozens of names
anyway,
depending on what language.
Dude. But so those, like, I'm interested when it comes to those kinds of like relationships or whatever. And like in some of the other like stories, have really interesting elements, but like the like sitting with the like random people having conversations and like Geralt is kind of just there, like they lose me sometimes. So, I think that these changes like put more of the focus on the things that work best, for me, the things that are making it more of a potent story. So yeah.
See, one of the things I love about the series is I went into the books expecting a total testosterone fueled bug hunt, basically, your old science fiction fantasy, let's go kill some monsters, like aliens or something. And instead I get a philosophizing guy with long white hair sitting talking around campfires, figuring shit out all the time. I'm like, wait, it didn't make sense. I was like, that's not what I was expecting at all. And I was like, all right, I like this. This was what I was like, I'm down for this. This was a really intelligent series compared to what I was expecting. I was not expecting anything intelligent, and I got the exact opposite of what I expected. So I like the conversations, just so many really thoughtful conversations. And
I don't get me wrong, I like those kinds of more of the like the philosophizing and all of that. That it's more of the like, we're chatting about things that are happening in the world, and this is how we're introducing all the like, it's like exposition type conversations that happen a lot. And like that's where I'm kind of like, we're talking about these people that I don't know who these people are, and it's that kind of stuff. Not the philosophy stuff. That's interesting. I like that.
Google yourself a map, by the way. There's plenty of maps of the continent.
Yeah.
Over like, I know what you're talking about. Like the whole thing in the books, they do this a lot at first. They're like, oh, okay, we're going to introduce this Duke from so and so, and he was Cintra's family friend for this, and they do that literally in one huge exposition dump for a chapter in the books. It's like, and this guy is our friend from so and so, and this is Duke from I forget, like from the Duchy of blah blah, and they're all around the dinner table together, and they all start fighting. But you're like trying to keep track of who's fighting who and who likes who and who doesn't who. Like, so that was a little bit. I mean, you have that in almost every book. I mean, we're Wheel of Time fans, so first of all, keeping names and
exposition names,
should be our forte. However, that being said,
but it's a tricky thing to do that kind of exposition conversations, right? Like, and there often needs to be a lot of it, but like, it can work better or not so well. And there are definitely some scenes that are exposition-y conversation scenes in the books where I'm just kind of like, let's get to this.
What is the scene you remember or most enjoyed in this episode? The scene you're most fond of or that most sticks in your memory? We'll start with you. What? Did you want to go last?
No, sorry. I overstepped. I talk now.
Go.
I got excited. Sorry. So I enjoyed Renfri is not really a monster in the books as well as the show. I enjoyed seeing that over again because I know first reading about Renfri, because you get Stregobor's version of her, and you're like, ooh, she's killing all these people, she's a horrible person, like and they did this really good job of in the show doing the same thing in the books, where it's like, oh well, she has her reasons, she's not that bad of a person, so maybe that she's just a product of her environment. And I love the fact that Geralt will not allow Stregobor to touch her dead body like he did in the books. It's like, you like move and touch a hair on her head like you're dead, like same kind of thing. And I am just like Geralt is like so pictured as like so neutral, like chaotic neutral kind of type character, and I love how that just comes across like so much, like in the books, in the movies, like just throughout. I really enjoyed that. It was a really good experience to see that. I'm like, oh, that's Geralt.
I don't know if I'd go chaotic. I don't know if I'd go chaotic. Like maybe a
true.
Maybe
true neutral.
Yeah.
True neutral.
He has his own like
see that
principles that he follows. Like they're not necessarily that of others, but he has his own things that he's, well, seems to stick to anyway, most of the time.
And that was
those were good. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jen?
Not until later, so no, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Rebecca?
Yeah, it was hard for me to pick like one scene, and so what I kind of ended up with was, because I think that the themes that are introduced are like kind of the most important thing in this episode. So the part that I think exemplified that the most of the lesser evil was the sort of the climactic scene in Blaviken where he has to fight Renfri, but like the townspeople that are killed, because it's like he doesn't believe in the lesser evil, so he doesn't want to choose, right? Anytime he's faced with that, like, choose this because it's the lesser evil, he's like, nope, not doing it. Don't believe in the lesser evil. Evil is just evil. And he doesn't choose, but arguably, like, evil still happens. Like people are killed, and I think that was stronger in the books. We'll get to that, but I do like that as an idea. And it's even like, okay, so the people of Blaviken aren't like the most wonderful people, right? Like they are prejudiced against witchers, like they don't come across all that great, but at the same time, like they didn't deserve to die, right? So that is a moment that exemplifies, like, even with trying to opt out of this, I'm not going to choose, evil things happen.
Right. Yeah. The scene that stuck out the most, and this is kind of on a purely technical side, is that initiation of the fight, that tracking shot.
Mm-hmm.
From the moment Geralt starts fighting Renfri's guys, or boys, the moment he knocks that coral bolt, that bolt out of the air, and then starts fighting those guys, it's one long tracking shot until he takes that last guy's head off that's stuck to the door. And I watched that the first time, 2 years ago when it came up, and I had to rewind it.
Yeah,
wait, that
so
one
good.
tracking shot, and then I rewound it again,
really good,
and again, and I'm just like, that was beautifully
phenomenal.
Done.
Phenomenal.
Was just, technically, it was outstanding. Choreography was great, and I like fight scenes. I have to admit, fight scenes, especially, that's part of what I love about fantasy movies and and films. It's the sword fights. That's part of what I love about them.
Yeah, that's not very hippie like, Glenn.
Don't tell anybody.
Okay.
This is true.
I'll sick him on you.
No.
I'll sick him on you.
But you look so peaceful.
Yeah, I know, huh? And yeah, even the fight with Renfri was really well done.
Yeah. I like how she did the dagger and the sword. Like it was really cool. Like how she like rested it, like the dagger on her arm, and like went both ways with him. Like it was really good. It was really good. There's their non-verbal communication during the fight too, because when she kept going for his leg, and like that second time she stabbed him, he just looked at her like, if you come at me one more time, it's gonna be lethal.
Yeah,
it's gonna be lethal. And I got the fact that he was just trying to like just cruise. He was on cruise mode until she like pushed it too far, and then he just gave her a look like the girl like that look like during the battle, like if you come again.
And I found it interesting, she was going after his leg when it's him taking her in the leg that kills her in the book.
Yes,
it's the gash across the thigh that kills her,
right? That artery. It's a good time.
And they had to include that dagger because she had that dagger behind her back, ready to kill him if he came close when she was dying, because she's like, hold me. He ain't that stupid. And sure enough, he was smart to not be that stupid, because when she did die, out of her dead hands, dropped the dagger she was going to stab him with.
Yes.
So that brings us to the final question, and it's something we've added, everybody, to
Oh,
our
are we
audience.
not doing scenes that we didn't like? I actually have one.
I have one too.
Okay. Scene we didn't like then, yeah.
I have one too.
Not really a scene I didn't like, because honestly, like there wasn't any scenes that I didn't like, but I just had to mention that like the scene with Stregobor like gives me serious icks. Like he as a character is just icky. I don't like him.
Yeah.
Wait till you see season 2.
Oh, was there more of him? Wonderful.
Yeah. Not to spoil anything, but
It's fine. It's all good.
yeah. Wait,
Yeah, he's
or
right.
is it? Yeah, he's just. Or was it this season? Does he make
It
this
was
season?
season 2, and I
Okay,
know
yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
Okay,
Yeah.
I haven't watched season
But see,
2
the
yet.
last time I watched it, when I watched season 2, I watched season 1 and 2 all as one sitting. Well,
Oh, that
not
would be
one
nice.
sitting, not as one sitting, but like over 2 days. So it kind of like all blurred in my head where season 1 and 2 cut off.
He gets
So,
worse.
okay.
He gets worse.
Yeah, he just, the actor's good. The actor's really good. In the part.
So I don't dislike the scene because like it's not a bad scene. It's just like it's good actually because like they've made that whole thing he's created is just it's icky.
Was it the extras?
Well, yeah, I mean, like he like the world he's created for himself that he's living in, and just his whole vibe, right? Like, I'm just gonna like camp out in this like place and try to get like this person who's bothering me like killed, and it's just he's an icky guy. I'm not saying Renfri's perfect, they both have their issues, but
yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, he's icky.
They're both monsters.
Yeah.
The thing that bothered me most in the show, and this is a show thing, this is like I watched it again and I'm like, okay, this bothered me the first watch and now it's bothering me again. So I know it's like sunk. Okay, so I'm on a second monitor because I typed it all with all my notes. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking on my Google Doc. Okay, so getting back to Calanthe dying, right? But with the twist, here it goes. She's lying. She's like, I like how she talked about the Nilfgaardians were like, okay, the Nilfgaardians are cutting and they take no prisoners. They mutilate people. They cut people's tongues off and feed them to the dogs. They take off their legs. They burn them. So it's a shot by shot, frame by frame of her going on these gruesome things. And then it's showing Nilfgaardians killing people normally. Like there's no torture going on. There's zero torture. So she's like, you don't understand. These people have to take poison and commit suicide because if they don't, they're going to suffer all these torturous things. And meanwhile, like all the soldiers are just, they're dying. Yeah, they're being killed. But it's like, it really takes the sting out of how important these people need to take poison to kill themselves. And you have that one guy that just went absolutely balls to the wall and stuck the dagger in his mouth and just like poked it through his own head. Like that gruesome whole scene, it kind of took the sting out of all that play a little bit when it's frame by frame. As she's saying this, they will torture, they will mutilate, and they're just like normally killing people. Like I'm like, if you're gonna land that, like have at least one scene with one person being tortured or something. I don't want to see the torture, but at the same time, it takes like really what's like I was confused. I was like, that's confusing. That is very confusing. They're just normally like normal soldiers killing people.
But
like,
is that intentional that like
I don't know. I don't know what that was.
I don't know either. But it just makes me wonder, like, is it supposed to show that like, okay, well, everyone thinks that like their enemy is like this like inhuman like monster, like they're worse than other people, they're doing these horrible things, and so that's her perception, but actually they're just the same. I don't know. It raises that point, which I didn't really think about, but makes me think about it now.
It's a good question, but I
like that, Rebecca. I never considered that before.
The impression I get though of the Nilfgaardians, I don't know. A lot of those guys, I don't know. I think you might be right, but if we go with the assumption that Calanthe is right and that's what the Nilfgaardians are like, Jen's point is, I have to agree completely.
Oh yeah, and that's where again it's a question for me, because are the Nilfgaardians supposed to be really particularly evil in battle, doing, yeah, that exists, right? So I mean, it's not like that doesn't exist as a fantasy trope. And I don't know if they're, I don't know enough about the Nilfgaardians to really know which way it's supposed to be.
I offhand don't recall them in the books being any worse than any of the other human kingdoms.
That's how I took it. They're just like, they're more like they go to war more and then we're bloodthirsty, yeah, but are like, as far as like they torture every single person, I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know about that.
It sounds kind of like one of those, sort of myths, drawing from all of our Wheel of Time experience, right? Like, these things that spring up, these narratives around, that aren't really true, but that people spread. And it would make sense if they are more warlike, if they are the ones that are going around trying to conquer people, which is bad enough, right? Like if you're like doing the war of aggression, like that's bad. So
Nilfgaard is definitely that. They are very much the most warlike.
Yeah, they're not like cool. We're not like, yay, Nilfgaard.
But there are some aspects as you go along in this series, the main saga, that you'll come to understand that Nilfgaard in some ways is better than the Northern Kingdoms. I'm not going to spoil how, but
I'll have to watch for that. Like basically, what do I think of Nilfgaard as we go along? But yeah, I could definitely.
In other ways, they're horribly more rotten than the Northern Kingdoms towards a certain group of certain type of individuals.
I know what you're talking about, Glenn. But it's I don't know, like it was just like, just taking that in, I was like, wait a minute, what are you trying to get to? So I never considered, Rebecca has a point that before I began this conversation, I had not taken into account. Maybe, like you said, it's the propaganda machine. Maybe they have a PR thing going on, and that's, Calanthe really thought that, and maybe it was to show the audience Calanthe doesn't know what she's talking about. So maybe that was the angle that I missed. Yeah.
The Lioness of Cintra not knowing what she's talking about?
Yeah, well, that's definitely a thing.
That's definitely a thing.
Rebecca's right there. It's definitely a thing. So maybe, but at the same time, I don't know. It kind of struck me, but I didn't realize that maybe I was supposed to be taking it that way on purpose, intentionally. Yeah. So that could be a thing. I don't know.
Otherwise, it's a perfect classic example of showing or telling, not showing.
Yeah.
Which is just, supposedly is always a bad thing to do, but not always.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I didn't really have a scene, like a specific scene, to be the counter to one that I liked or remembered the most.
Yeah, it's hard. It was hard.
There's a scene I forgot, that I didn't remember, and it's that one that I forgot.
Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah. So that brings us to the new question category of topic that we didn't do before, and we're introducing it now. It's how well did the episode or show address the themes and ideas of the book, or at least the short story being dealt with? And we'll start with you, Jen.
Okay. So I think it's pretty close to the book material, pretty close to the source material. I'd say it's pretty close. I mean, obviously we discussed like big differences. Obviously one of the main things is the timeline, like we began this conversation with, about how it's jumping around. Like it didn't jump around nearly so much in the books. It's pretty like slightly lateral, like, as far as movement, linear, I shouldn't say lateral, linear, that's the word. So I'm gonna, you asked for a grade. You asked for a grade of how close it stayed to the books. I'm gonna say it's a 7. I'm gonna give it a solid 7. So 10 is absolutely 100% like word for word. So 7 is pretty close. It's pretty close. So I mean, it's a little camp. It's more campy in the show. It's more made for drama. It's the book, it hits harder, and it's more the book is actually very the pacing is phenomenal in the Witcher books, like especially at first. It's like we do this, we go to this scene, we do this, we go to the next town, we go to this, we go to this. And so it's in that way, I guess it's pretty quick to adapt, but it's more burdensome as you go on. The more Witcher books you read in the same kind of setup and scenario and takedown, it's actually, you feel like the more Witcher books they put out, the heavier the burden is. So like it's not as campy in the show, because they're what they try to do differently with the show is, and they do this intentionally. Through the books, it's mainly just Geralt's POV. In the show, you're also seeing what's happening with Cirilla with her POV, and then other characters which are not in this episode, so I'm not going to name, but you get their POVs later. So of course they deviate that because they want them to stand alone instead of being like people that Geralt meets. So obviously that is a huge deviation there. But so you have a little bit of drama made for TV because of that. You have a little bit of camp. It is a campy show, but I like that it's intentional camp. It brings you in. You want to see the next fight scene. Anyway, I don't know what I'm saying. It's close. I'd say it's a close 7. I just don't get the gravitas that I get from the books, from the show. I feel like these characters are more safe when I watch the show versus the books. I really feel that there's a more sense of danger at every fight that Geralt's going to get into with the books, even though I know like he's like the main character and like he's got plot armor and that kind of thing going on. The sense of urgency is deeper. That isn't carried across in the show, and I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. I think they want people to immerse themselves in fantasy without feeling frightened by it. And if you're new to fantasy, or if this is your first kind of brush with fantasy or foray, there's a lot of heavy, hard-hitting, like Glenn talked about, like philosophical points, as well as like it's a scary world. It's not like a happy, cozy fantasy. It's a deep, gritty fantasy. So I think they try to put that in as a more lighthearted background to subtly make a more serious point, and I think they did that pretty good. And so close to the books, other than the feeling of dread, existential dread that I get from the books a little bit, I don't get that. And obviously the POV, I give it a 7. I give it a 7, so that's what I give it. So,
in your view, what was it Andrzej Sapkowski was trying to say with this particular story?
So we're talking just The Witcher in general.
With this episode, with this particular story.
With this particular story,
and how episode did they adapt that, would you say?
There's several. The biggest takeaway, because because this would carry through what Ciri's going through, what Renfri's going through, and through what Geralt's going through. So if you're taking a basic thing that all 3 characters, and not just Geralt, because that's how the show wants you to perceive them. They want you to perceive Ciri's own person, not just Geralt's destiny, even though they do bring that in. So the big overlying plot point, and I was actually bringing this up later, is destiny. Destiny is the big thing. Destiny. But that's not something that everyone that's going to watch the show is necessarily even agrees with or would sit well with an audience. So I think if you're saying the number one thing that Geralt, Ciri, and Renfri all have in common, the lesson that in this episode specifically they're trying to teach you is, do not judge a book by its cover. Because first you have this bias towards Renfri, as she's this like horrible person, as that Stregobor says she is, like she's from this woman of Lilith or whatever, and she's going to go around and she brings the fall of mankind, is very literally how they say that if Renfri doesn't die, she's going to she's the last one alive and we have to kill her because she's so evil, right? And you learn that she's not. Geralt, the very first opening scene is him being mocked in the thing because he's so different and he kills monsters and he kind of needs to be alone, and he's like, so that is one thing. What holds Geralt, Ciri, and Renfri together is don't judge a book by its cover again. Yeah. So you got that part. Okay, good. And the third part is Ciri. She comes across as a pretty princess, right? She comes across as probably like the most boring person at first. Like, oh my God, she doesn't want to dance. She's a typical teenage girl. She wants to be involved in what her grandmother's doing and what's going on with the kingdom and what's this. And oh no, I'm sitting in my room. I'm a princess in a tower. But then she starts screaming. And then you hear and see the monolith and stuff like that. So she's got a hidden power in her that you don't know about. So maybe you shouldn't be so quick to judge her either. So that is, I think, if you're talking about the underlying theme for just this particular episode, not The Witcher in general, just season 1, episode 1, that has to be overwhelmingly what can apply to all 3 characters equally. That's what I would say. So, anyway, go ahead.
Thoughts, Rebecca?
So I'll do my rating too, since
Yeah.
Okay. So I actually had for faithfulness to or similarity to the source material, the same. I also rated it a 7 out of 10. So I won't belabor that too much, because I agree. But as far as like the themes and how it did translating and adapting the themes, I mean, so I kind of focused on like the short story, The Lesser Evil, like what I felt like the theme of that story was, and did it come across in the episode. So I touched on this a little bit before, which is, the way I kind of interpreted it is like, Geralt has his own moral lines that he is firm on, right? Like there's things that he will do, things that he won't do. Like for instance, this whole story is about like people trying to get him to kill other people, which is not something that he does, right? Like it's interesting that's the focus here, right? He's like, no, I kill monsters. I don't kill humans, and as we go on, we learn more about like, he decides what he thinks is a monster and what isn't a monster. It's not what other people think, it's what he thinks. And then both Stregobor and Renfri are arguing to him that it would be the lesser evil to kill the other one, that they would be, saving further harm from happening if he were just kill this one person. And he's like, nope, not buying it. Killing that person, whether it be Renfri or Stregobor, would still be evil, and I'm not doing it. I'm not choosing. And I just felt that the theme that came across most strongly for me is that when so many people in Blaviken are killed, despite he's trying to keep people from being killed, but by opting out of this choice, I'm not doing either of them. But people still are killed and evil still happens. I mean, he ends up killing people even though he didn't want to. That was the theme that came across for me. Like, and I don't know what the answer of that is necessarily, because what are you supposed to do? He's like, I don't buy it. I don't buy that there is a lesser evil, and I'm not going to be forced to pick one. But actions or inactions can still have consequences, unintended ones, and evil can still be done. And so there's no clear answer, I don't think, but that was the theme that kind of came across very strongly to me in the story. And I think it was there in the episode, because they adapted that part of it fairly straightforwardly. It was there. Not quite as strong, because it's just harder to like translate the depth of when that's written down versus in a show where there's a lot of other things happening as well. So I don't think the theme was quite as strong. I think they did bring it in, and I think they tried to bring that across, and it did come across. It was just not quite as potent for me as it was in the story, that theme.
Yeah. I too give it a 7 for faithfulness. So that's going to be a big old 7 on this episode.
7.
As for themes, I'm going to say it's right there on the name, on the title, The Lesser Evil, like you. I think this short story in this episode is part of Geralt's learning a lesson, his journey to realizing he has to make choices. And it all comes into play down the road in the main saga, when he has to start realizing that there are lesser evils, and I think he learns that in this episode. Which was the lesser evil? That's still a choice to be made, a decision to be made.
Right.
Did you make the right choice?
Yeah.
Because Stregobor is a monster. He's one of the sorcerers. He's a wizard, and I'm not gonna paint all wizards this way, all sorcerers this way, but he does have that line in there. about, are you still out there killing those last remaining dying, creatures of, last of the, nearly extinct creatures, and the thing is, sorcerers made those. Big spoiler for the prequel book that's not going to be adapted to the show. Season of Storms is not going to be adapted to the show. If you haven't read the book and you're watching this, I'm sorry. But you find out that a lot of these monsters, quite a good number of these monsters, were created by the sorcerers to begin with. And he's one of them. Whether or not Stregobor himself actually created any monsters, he's still siding with that. With that line there, he's still showing his bias.
Mhm.
And his whole, and then all of these children, these little girls that he took apart in, I don't mean taking apart, but, well, yeah, taking apart with the autopsies and the one vivisection, with the putting up in the towers, which is a nod to, who's the blonde hair? Rapunzel with the long hair.
Rapunzel.
Yeah, it's a nod to Rapunzel.
Oh, but can we
had
also talk about how Renfri is in the
Snow
in the
White.
story she's
Snow
Snow White.
White.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, and also Cinderella. Not Cinderella, yeah, Sleeping Beauty. She's also Sleeping
Okay.
Beauty.
She's all of them, I guess.
Because the prince came and rescued her while she was in a slumber.
Oh.
and
Well, that's
took her
Snow White
back
too.
home. Okay,
Isn't
yeah.
that- yeah.
Sleeping
Yeah.
Beauty's, yeah. But yeah, he plays with, throughout the series, he plays with folk tales.
Yeah.
But
That comes big later. Season 2 is all the folktale.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, I'm
Stregobor,
excited for that. That's
over
fun.
and over, just all sorts of things. Over and over, Stregobor makes it clear he's a monster. And then, at the end of the short story, he makes it clear he's not sticking around to protect these people. He's leaving them behind.
Of course.
He's not going to do anything to save these people.
Mhm.
He's an utter monster.
Mhm.
Renfri, well, I mean, it does turn out that it does kind of seem like there's something to this prophecy, because she does have, this resistance to magic that
Mhm.
she even admits to,
Yes.
And she's got, she is a product of her, her environment,
Mhm.
yes, but, I don't know how much, veracity there is to the stories of what she did as a little child, but, if those stories are true, she might well have been a bad seed from childhood, but she's at least got that, magic, immunity. And she also looks to Lilith. She does a prayer, like, she in the episode.
Yes.
It's not in the book, but she
Mhm.
says, "Lilith, help me," or something like
She
that
does.
in the episode. And I went back and I looked in the book. I did a Google search on the ebook,
And she
and
doesn't know how to say it.
Lilith's in there 3 times, and it's never once said by her.
Mm-mm.
So the episode, the writer of the episode, who's the showrunner, I believe, is trying to make the point that,
Lauren?
yeah, Hisrich, right? Isn't
Mhm.
that her name?
Mhm.
Trying to make the point that Renfri is a monster too. Stregobor and Renfri are both monsters.
Yes. I
But
agree with that.
Renfri had 5 monsters with her.
Mhm.
All those 5 guys she had with her are brutal, sadistic sons of bitches. At least in the books, you see it a lot more clearly than you could see it in the tavern or on the
Oh, yeah.
streets there.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you find out who they are from the tavern keeper, and you find out about the Treadum, ultimatum, and you
Ultimatum.
find out their ultimatum, and you find their background. So Renfri and 5 nasty sons of bitches. So that's 6 killers versus a sorcerer. 5 is more than 1.
Mhm.
1's lesser. You side with the lesser. So killing the 5 or 6, that is the lesser of evil, because he was saving the people of Blaviken from a massacre.
Hmm.
And she came in with Marilka, with a blade to Marilka's neck. She was a
She
direct
did.
threat to a little girl.
She
Yes, a
was.
psychopathic little girl who kills dogs and rats, because it was clear she killed her dog. So,
That-
I mean,
Yeah.
That was alarming. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that little girl was born under the black sun too. I don't know. But, you know, yes, I've heard, I'm almost 50. And for the last 45 years of my life, 35 years of my life, sorry, I've been hearing the phrase, I'm not going to choose between the lesser of two evils, specifically when coming to election.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say which side I'm going towards here, but that's always pissed me off because although, yeah, make a decision because one side's evil, but the other side's evil, you know? And I'm sorry, the way I don't like the phrase choice between lesser two evils. The way I always put it is I'd rather get stabbed in the gut than shot in the face with a shotgun, you know? And that's kind of what, the choice Geralt made here is he took a knife to the gut, literally,
He did.
instead of getting shot in the face with a shotgun.
Interesting.
And that's the lesson he had to learn from this little adventure, this little event here.
Yeah, so we're kind of on the same page, but I will say I don't think it's clear to me what is the lesser of two evils in this scenario, but I would just argue that by him trying to opt out of any of them, we still got evil. Like I think, so there was no avoiding it really. So I agree with you that he needs to learn to make choices and not just be like, I'm not deciding. Because you're right, they're both monsters, and you have to look at like maybe who's the bigger threat in the moment and things like that.
And
on the other hand, Stregobor, it seems to me like the stuff he had done
by choice.
Well, the stuff he had done in the past was probably worse, in my mind. On the other hand, Renfri was the bigger threat in the moment. So
yes,
it's
and
a tough
in the
call.
future. And known to be in the future.
Yeah.
Now, I want to be clear. I am not saying
I don't know about
done
the
to
future
Renfri. Renfri was done shittily. What was done to her whole life was horrendous and should never have happened.
Yeah.
And she got the shit end of the stick her entire life. And I feel horrible about that, but in the end, at the point he was at, and going forward with the future, she was the threat, the known threat. Stregobor's actions, his threat was mostly in the past, and it seems to me that most of these little girls from the Black Sun, the Eclipse girls, were gone. At least that's the impression I got. Most of them were gone. Renfri was the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, not that it's Geralt's job, but like Stregobor shouldn't just be like, oh well, he's done killing all those girls. Let's just let him go. So, he was a real piece of work. Is a real piece of work.
Right.
But.
I didn't see Stregobor at the time of watching this episode. In this episode, I don't see Stregobor as a future threat.
I like how you put that, and for that I do agree. If you put it that way and only this episode, I would agree. However, like he's got magic. That's a thing.
Yeah.
And they didn't put it this way as clearly with the ultimatum that was going on in that town as in they did in the books. But like he didn't want to come out and face her, so he is the one that put those people in danger in the first place, even though Renfri could have made the choice to not hold the entire town hostage in order to get to one dude. So she was putting the town in danger, but he knew that she was like, and he was going to be okay with everybody even killed. He's like, no sweat off my back. I can stay in my tower.
Right. Exactly.
So
she could have walked away.
She could have walked away, and she lied to Geralt.
There are no winners here.
So she could have walked away. She did not. She actually had a future before her that she could have just said goodbye to her henchmen, tried to become happy. I don't know doing what, but see, there's the thing. Here's another thing that I think is the real, like, super secret subtext that's going on. Say Renfri was like, you know what? Like she originally, quote unquote, lied to Geralt about, said that, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go back. I'm just going to walk out and be a different person. Based on her past and what happened to her, could she have happened? And what could she do? She could make, I guess, her living as a sellsword, but I don't think there's a place in that society for people like her.
I think she could have taken her throne. She talked like she could take it back.
Could she?
She was kicked out. I didn't get that. Maybe I misinterpreted.
Well, maybe not in the show. Maybe not in the show. I believe in the short story she did have a line or two where she said she could take the throne.
I'm trying to remember.
Because I definitely, I won't swear to being certain about this at all, but my impression was not that she could do that. Like I didn't, at least in the show, maybe, but I don't know.
Maybe in the books, I haven't, because I reread the books a couple weeks ago, but I don't remember if that was made clear where she could or not. But Glenn said he did, so I want to take.
Maybe I'm remembering the line wrong. The line wrong.
I could be wrong there, though, myself, though, honestly. Yeah. It's very potentially possible that she did make it clear in the books, that I'm just forgetting how that worked out because I had moved on to other things in my brain past that point and didn't fixate on that.
But I think,
I'll be honest, when I listened to it this afternoon, it was while I had that migraine I told you about, and I was doing a very hippie thing, trying to get rid of that migraine.
Taking a nap?
Yeah, before I took the nap, it kind of led to me needing to take a nap. And I was listening to it while doing that hippie thing and coughing because of that hippie thing. And I remember hearing a line about taking the throne, and maybe that stuck in my head. So maybe I'm just having a brain fart. So, Cheech and Chong would be proud.
There you go.
I think either way, it's fair to say that like she didn't have to do what she did. So, that is certainly true. And, as I was saying, I don't think either of them come out looking good. And it's not clear to me what the right answer is. But I think ultimately they presented it in a way where there's no clear lesser evil in my mind, right? Like his arguments to be made about what is the lesser evil to do here. But once he's in this situation, I think what we can also take away is that just saying, hey, I'm not doing anything, that doesn't really work out well either.
Yeah, it just goes to show you that it's kind of like going back to Wheel of Time, how when I probably shouldn't say this, but like how you have Abdul's character, I forget what his name is, the white cloak that comes in.
Valda,
that's right. I should know this. What the hell? I didn't know what Valda was, but that's hilarious. Anyway, when he comes in the tent and he's like, and he tells Egwene, he goes, well, no choice is still a choice, about how they could decide who was going to live and who's going to die. It's kind of like the same kind of thing here. There's no choice is still a choice.
That's true.
God, I cannot believe that I forgot Vault. Jesus Christ. But anyway, wow, I'm not gonna leave that down.
References are always fun here. That's part of our baked into our roots here at this channel. So
anyway, I literally forgot. So yeah, it does show Geralt, like, you can't just take a stand and just kill monsters like the rogue. It's very almost like rogue cowboy kind of like type. Like, I'm just gonna kill the monsters, partners. And it's like, well, you maybe needed to interject here because it just goes to show you, once you become aware of a situation, once you know what's going to happen, because he was aware the day before, okay, this is going to go down, it's going to be a bloodbath. You're no longer like just a villager or innocent bystander. Unfortunately, through no fault of your own, you are now brought into having heightened awareness, and you have an extra knowledge. And if you have that, then you just choose not to do anything with it, then that almost makes you part of the evil, doesn't it? In a way, if you just choose to do nothing, because now there's a little bit of guilty conscience on your hands. If you knew that this is going to go down and people are dead because of you not making a choice and interjecting either way, it's a little bit on you now too. So And I'm sure Geralt's character, with how he's being built, would probably have considered that at some point. Like if he had just rode away and let the two battle out or come what may and whatever ultimatum, because technically he still had a choice to just like ride off in the sunset.
Yeah.
Like, and not do anything. Just let her kill the girl and be like, I'm out, peace, deuces. So he could have still technically made that choice. But if he did that, there's no plausible or feasible way any person with any slight conscience could be like, well, now some of that, especially if he is a capable warrior of being able to like fight for the innocent and just chose not to, that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. So
your mention of cowboy in there made something click in my head, that there's another popular hero type character who starts out pretty neutral. He just does a job, gets hired to go kill things that are not
Mandalorian.
The Mandalorian.
Oh,
and
it's a Western.
John had a point where he had to come to realize he can't be neutral. He has to stand up and take a side, and that's basically what he did when he went back to rescue Baby Yoda and rescue him from the stormtroopers. He picked a side, and that was against the Imperials. And that kind of reminded, that in a way is kind of like The Witcher, and there are similarities between the two characters.
There are. There's
a reason why they're both pretty popular characters on TV right now.
That lone kind of role is kind of interesting, especially in, I think, today's world and society, because we all feel like we're struggling against a bigger battle and we're all alone in a way, even though we're not. We can sometimes feel that way. And I think right now that's kind of appealing to people, that, even if you feel like you don't fit in, you still have a place, and your decisions still matter and are important. So I think it's kind of interesting, especially in today's climate, to have, it's funny you mentioned that, Glenn, because that's kind of the heroes that we see now. And then if you looked, back in history, other heroes were prevalent, like the good guy, like Superman was prevalent. Wartime, it was like Captain America. That's when he came around, like literally, like stuff like that. And then depending on the society you're in, the heroes emerge differently. And what we see as a good character right now wasn't what was filling up movie theaters a long time ago. It was a completely different mindset. So it's very interesting. Yeah, it's a social commentary. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
There's a lot of that on the TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thoughts, Rebecca?
Oh no, it's interesting. So I feel like we're having a good discussion just about like these themes, and obviously there's a lot there because we're going to have slightly different perspectives on it, but like there's just a lot there to pick apart. So that makes it interesting. I like that there wasn't a clear, this is right, this is wrong. Like it's a thorny, messy situation. And no, it's not that simple. There's no simplicity. I don't think this is a simple world. This is not a black and white good and evil world.
It wasn't this. I don't think the world is, but I think this episode, this short story, when it comes down to what they had planned for Market Day, and then Sivril laughs. Shut up, Sivril, immediately. Yeah, I think it was that simple, because there were 6 people there planning to massacre a village, a market full of villagers, just to get at one person.
Yeah.
Revenge is never.
You end up hating Stregobor more, though. You end up hating Stregobor.
Yes, true.
Yes.
But see, he's not in the rest of the books. This is the only time he's in the books. We never see him again.
But you're bringing that in when we don't know that, right? We don't know that that's the case. I mean, I will agree that in this moment, Renfri is the more direct threat to these people in this town.
Yes.
So that, that if Renfri was gone, Stregobor isn't going to just like massacre these people. He's not threatening to do that. But he's certainly evil. So like, are you going to like do his evil bidding? Are you going to just let him get away with all the evil things that he's done? Because
No,
I mean, it's just saying there's no, I don't think it's black and white. And I don't know what the right answer is.
and
Just kill them both?
It's not
I mean,
just Renfri. It's not just Renfri. That's my point. Those 5 guys she had with her.
right, but would they have massacred the town if she wasn't there telling them to do it? I mean, they're assholes, but like
they wouldn't have been there. They wouldn't have been there.
Right. So I mean, you could make an argument for like, okay, well, kill Renfri and kill Stregobor and then just, you know, be on your way. Not because they asked you to, but because you just see that they're both menaces to society and, you know, kill them both.
In that world, in that particular world, I wouldn't object to that. In our world, I'd object to it, but in that world,
have, you know, justice systems and legal and prisons and stuff. But
anyway. I say it's a little taking the law into your own hands, lone cowboy. But in that world, yes, I agree because you know this
is the way things go, right?
Where that is the way things go. Yeah,
we don't really have justice of any variety, you know.
No. And they would see like all the different freaks killing each other off, and the people in the town, they'd be like, I don't like a wizard because they didn't like Stregobor.
Yeah.
Like, and they didn't like
Renfri.
They were like, about Renfri. They were most okay with her, but she was already dead. So there's that. And then, of course, you know, it would be Geralt and Stregobor. They'd be like, you know, whoever loses, we win. That's how the Fantasy will look at it.
But assuming you have like perfect foresight too, right? So if you have foresight and you could say, okay, well, these are the way it's going to turn out. You know, and in the best case scenario is Stregobor is dead and Renfri's dead. And that's the end of it, you know? But so here's the other thing, like, okay, Renfri wasn't right, but like you could end the massacre by killing Stregobor too, right? Like if you killed him, she's not going to do it because he's dead because she only wants him. So like that's what I'm saying. It's not clear cut. Like you know, either way, if you kill one or the other of them, you prevent the massacre.
Which is better, killing 1 Nazi or 6 Nazis? I think killing 6 Nazis is better than killing 1 Nazi. Just to put it in real world terms.
But you're looking at it from the perspective of I'm getting rid of 6 evil people instead of 1 evil person. He's looking at it from the perspective of I don't want to kill anyone. That's not my business. That's not what I'm here to do. So I don't want to be responsible for like killing any of these people. So
and I think that's a lesson he has to learn. That sometimes when you have the ability to defend people and do what's right, you have to step up and do it. You can't just hold yourself back and try to be neutral.
I mean, I think that I agree with that point, but also no one made him like judge, jury, and executioner. He's not like, I'm going to go around and just like, you know, I don't know. I think there's a little bit of the like.
2 people did, and they Stregobor and Renfri both did. And by saying it for the other, they said, "Do it to me," by proxy.
But in general, right? Like it's not his job. You know, he doesn't see it as his job. No one's decided, and you know, it shouldn't really be any one person's job to go around and do that. So. You know, just in general, as he's making decisions for what he's supposed to do, like how do you know, incorporate that into it? Because you see wrong in the world, you see an evil person, you're just supposed to like take them out. Like, I don't know. It's super complicated, and I just don't think it's complicated. I don't think there's an easy answer as to what he's supposed to do, because in his mind, none of that was any of his business. It's not his job. He didn't want anything to do with that. And yeah, he got sucked into it. So like he then he is involved, whether he wants to be or not. And his inaction still results in bad stuff happening.
In general, I agree with you. In this particular circumstance, I think he did what needed to be done. He did the right thing. That he should have chosen to do. Well, maybe not before he found out what he did in the short story, or what he found out from the dream when he when he wakes up in the morning and realizes that she bullshitted him. you know. But outside of this one particular instance, I agree with you on that totally. It's just this one, he did what needed to be done. As sad as that is in her case, because I don't know which was the bigger influence on how she ended up, whether this curse, as it seems she did have affected on her, with the evidence being her magic resistance, because that's not natural. That's impossible for humans.
We take a moment to appreciate the wiliness of Stregobor the magician going, you know what, she's coming for me, so what am I going to do? I'm going to hold an entire town captive, because if she just comes for me, like, maybe I'll be dead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to a town. So I'm going to move to where there's a lot of other people, because she, being evil bad person, right? Because she is, let's whether on circumstances or whether she would be that way naturally or not, let's just she is. So she has no qualms about like killing people. So maybe if I move to a large populous area, oh look, and here's this empty deserted tower that just so happens to like conveniently be next to a whole bunch of people, so where if she holds, maybe someone's going to come try to help, and then I can tell them about how evil she is, and maybe I can get like, hey, didn't know that Geralt was going to show up. And even in the books it's like, oh, a witcher, perfect, come on in, you're just the person I need, because she's coming for me. And like the very next day, like, you know what I mean? So but we got to think about like the forethought Stregobor had, because he wasn't there in that tower originally. He took up camp. Why? Because he knew that it was eventually going to be a showdown between him and her. He was going to use those people. So his intention, like before she even showed up, he knew that she was going to, first of all, be bad. So there's a thing. But also like the evil maliciousness of the forethought of the plotting of this guy in his tower being like, haha, now I sit back and wait. Like, it's crazy.
I think the reason he was in Blaviken was more that he could take over the role of Irian than to be around a lot of people, because this is a tiny little fishing village that you know has guards that don't really know how to use their weapons.
Yeah.
You know, if he wanted human shields, move to a city.
Yeah.
That has city watch who actually know how to use their weapons, and thousands of human shields, not a few hundred. That would work out. Tower. Move to Cintra. Move to the capital of Cintra.
That would be bad.
He would be safer in the capital of Cintra 50 years before the invasion of Cintra, or 40 years, whatever the time span is. You know, decades earlier, he'd have been safer in the capital of Cintra than he would have been in Blaviken.
True.
You know.
True.
So
it's still cunning.
I think it was more about pretending to be Irian and to have this tower that was already there, ready-made, with a ready-made persona to adopt and to hide.
Yeah, he definitely enjoyed the tower. So I definitely I see your point about him becoming Irian. It could be the thing instead of that's true.
I think that was the bigger reason.
I'll concede that for sure. Absolutely. You make a good point. Okay, I can see that. Anyway,
any other themes or anything anybody saw in this episode? In this,
I think we covered it.
I think we did good. I think I'm happy. I think
we did a good episode here.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.
It's very nice.
Great time having you on.
Thank you. Yeah.
Next week we'll hopefully have Max back, and we will be covering episode 2 of season 1, The Witcher, and covering, I'm not sure which short story that is. I'll have to look and double check this week.
I'm forgetting at the moment as well, but
good. And
I shouldn't, because I just looked it up, but whatever.
We'll be continuing our coverage of The Witcher season 1 for a little while here, and we'll see how that goes. I thank everybody for watching. Leave us a like and a subscribe, and don't forget to be awesome.